Hey guys, tonight we're going way back. Picture this. You're walking through a bamboo grove at twilight. There's a hush in the air, mist curling around your ankles. Somewhere in your pocket, ching, you hear the faint jingle of something. Not your phone, not your keys, it's gold, real gold, but not the kind you'd steal or stash away. This gold is different, smaller, softer and strange, the kind you'd tuck into your sleeve. For luck. Tonight I want to tell you the story of the koban, a little gold coin that Japan once used not just as currency, but as a charm, a protector, sometimes even a tiny voice from the past, and trust me, it gets weirder. Ghost ships whispering, coins, and one very confused samurai. Honestly, if you lived back then, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes without wondering if your lucky charm was quietly judging you. So, before we go further, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Only if you actually enjoy this kind of stuff. And hey, if you're tuning in from far away or just curled up under a cozy blanket, drop your city and time zone in the comments. I love seeing where these sleepy little history stories end up. Now, dim the lights. Let's walk into the mist together. You're treading carefully across moss-covered ground. The chill of an Edo period April night slips into the sleeves of a borrowed kimono, probably stolen from the dreams of some merchant. In your palm is a small gold coin, barely larger than your thumbnail. Heavy though, heavier than it should be, like it's keeping secrets. They called it koban. Back in the 1600s, Japan had just emerged from centuries of war. With peace settling in, the new Tokugawa government decided they needed a coin. Not just any coin, but one that radiated strength, stability, and, well, a bit of sparkle. And so the koban was born. But here's the thing, in Japan almost everything has a spirit. Even a teapot can get angry if you boil water too long. So it's no surprise, people believed the koban had a personality too. You hear a rice wine seller whisper, "Koban brings blessings, but only if you treat it right." So people started hiding them in sleeves, hanging them in corners of their homes or tucking them under their pillows. Not to spend, but to wish. One merchant in Osaka swore his first big silk sale happened only after he secretly slipped a koban under a sashimi plate. The fish felt respected, he said. No one argued. Hard to debate a man who just bought 3 new shops. You step into an old cedarwood house. The sliding door creaks like it's breathing. On a tiny altar beside a statue of Amida Buddha hangs a koban tied with red string, dangling mid-air like a golden prayer whispering its own mantra. Some say koban can ward off evil if you rub it on a newborn's forehead. Others claim if you carry one, you won't lose a single slipper for a month. Was any of this ever official? Probably not. But when life feels as fragile as candlelight in the wind, you hold on to whatever shines. And the koban, it gleamed. Out. On the porch, a little girl is tossing a koban into a wooden bowl. 3 times in, she believes, and she'll get picked to play the fairy princess at the fall festival. First toss, clang, missed. Second toss, clang again. Third, plink, in it goes. She grins, doesn't need confirmation. Meanwhile, an old man in Kyoto tells a different story. One stormy night, he dropped his koban down a storm drain. The next day, he won the lottery. Someone asked, "But you lost your luck coin?" He winked. "Maybe it was teaching me how to let go." You walk through a quiet market. Red lantern light falls over a booth selling old charms. And there, it is, in the shadows. A koban wrapped in rice paper. On it, a tiny brushstroke. Keep the dreams safe. The seller leans in and says, "That one? It used to sleep under a poet's pillow." You're not sure if that's true or just a clever line, but your fingers close around it anyway. It's warm and heavier than it looks, like it's waiting to be remembered. A bell sounds faintly. In the distance, probably from a mountain shrine. No better time to make a wish than right after nightfall, And in this strange world where gold coins might be vessels of fate, you start to wonder, if the Koban really does have a soul, is it listening to you right now? You close your eyes for just a moment. The paper door rustles in the wind, and there it is, still nestled in your sleeve. You hear it before you see it, the sound of a stream threading its way through the trees, steady and cold, like someone whispering in a dream. You follow the sound, your fingers still resting gently on the Koban, tucked in your sleeve, as if just touching it could keep you from getting lost. The narrow path leads you to a small wooden house tucked between old cypress roots and drifting candlelight. The shadows of river scenes flicker across a folding screen. On the floor, a man sits hunched over a carving knife and a thin gold oval. His hands tremble, not from age but from reverence. He's a Koban engraver, not just a craftsman, something more like a ritualist. Because Koban weren't just currency, they were declarations, and not just anyone was allowed to carve into gold. Not every piece of gold was willing to be carved. You kneel beside him, watching as he carefully carves characters into the soft metal, Fu Shou An Kang, blessing, longevity, peace, and health. He looks up. His eyes are old, but bright. Don't think of these as words, he says quietly. They're messages. Back then, every Koban bore more than just a government seal. Some carried family crests, others held good wishes, secret jokes, even love poems. One man once gave his lover a Koban that read, "You shine like gold, but you're colder than winter." Romantic in the kind of way that makes you want to laugh and cry into a pillow. Each mark was made with a fine blade and a magnifying lens, under candlelight, because too much heat might warp the gold. The engraver couldn't talk, could barely breathe. One slip and the piece was useless, maybe a bracelet for a very spoiled cat. You sit quietly looking around the room. There are Koban everywhere, each one etched with a different character. Calm, grace, balance, dream. Some bear pictures, cherry blossoms, koi fish, even a turnip. You point to the turnip. The man smiles. That one was a merchant's request. He wanted his business to flow like a turnip downriver. Another merchant believed that carving the word patience into his Koban would help him stay. Calm when rice prices spiked. No one knows if it worked. But he did keep it in his palm during every negotiation, like a golden worry stone. Historians still argue whether these engravings actually increased a Koban's value or were just high-class superstition. Some say it was a way for the elite to distinguish pure Koban from the common kind. After all, not everyone could afford personalized gold. Then the old man invites you to try. You take the blade, touch the metal. It's soft, almost unnaturally. So not like metal, more like chilled skin. You carve something, maybe your name, maybe a wish, maybe just a curve with no meaning. But it feels good. The engraver doesn't ask what it is. He just nods, as if he already knows. Then he picks up the Koban, slips it into a silk pouch, and presses it into your hand. "Take it," he says. "But remember, gold doesn't remember your promises. It remembers how you made it feel." Later, as you leave, someone tells you a story. A woman once carved her daughter's name into a Koban and buried it beneath a peach tree. That year, the tree bloomed twice. They say the girl never lost her way again, no matter how far she traveled. Someone else remembers a defeated samurai who carved the word return into gold. 1 year later, he came back, won a duel without drawing his sword. He said, "The Koban fought for me." You smile. It's a sweet story, maybe a lie. But sometimes, a beautiful story is exactly what you need before sleep. As night falls, moonlight catches on a freshly engraved Koban. The characters shimmer faintly. Maybe heart, maybe dream, maybe something that can't be translated into the language of the awake. But you understand, because you've touched it, and it touched you back. You wake up, or at least you feel like you've woken up. in an old street bathed in flickering lantern light. Everything is dipped in a golden haze, and the only sound is the soft, wind-like echo of footsteps that don't quite belong to this century. An old woman stands by a pushcart covered in strings of Koban coins, oval, glinting, hung like tiny paper lanterns. She gestures to you, murmuring something in a language you can't quite place. It might be Japanese, it might be a tongue that's been asleep for 100 years. You step closer, and she offers you a slightly misshapen koban. On the back, there's an engraving of a cat wearing a hat. Good luck with the tax evasion, she chuckles, toothless and wise. You laugh, unsure if she's joking. But deep down you sense she isn't, because what you're about to uncover is a chapter of history both mischievous and oddly tender. A time when koban weren't just currency. They were secrets, bribes, hidden love letters disguised in gold. In Gyutu, 18th century Japan, life under the Tokugawa shogunate was a maze of rigid rules. Samurai couldn't be merchants, merchants couldn't show wealth, farmers couldn't wear gold, women couldn't... Well, the list went on. Imagine a world where every gesture was watched, and a single sign of luxury could mean punishment. So, how did people hide their riches? With koban, there were no banks. Stuffing gold in futons, risky, so people got creative. A wealthy woman might wear a hollow hairpin with a koban tucked inside. A sake shop owner might glue one beneath a tea tin. And if you were really clever, you'd bake it into a mochi, not to eat, of course, but toast it just right, and it was asset protection you could hold in your palm. You spot a couple at the end of the street, wrapped in shadow. The girl slips the boy a paper-thin envelope, not a love letter, a koban engraved with a chrysanthemum, and the word wait, a gift that says what she can't. In a society where love had rules, koban became a secret language for those who weren't allowed to love aloud. There was even a joke among samurai. If a girl gives you a koban, check. The back. If it says love, don't get excited. It might say love, but my father forbids it. You step into a quiet tea house. The air smells like roasted barley. The server brings you a cup and a porcelain saucer printed with the image of a koban. He winks. Not real, but if someone places that saucer face up on a table, it means they're looking to buy something. The law doesn't allow. Once, a famous merchant was arrested for giving a koban engraved with "Together" to a government official. Bribery, they said. But the merchant protested, "I gave him a wish, not gold." Was this secret use of koban sanctioned by the Tokugawa? Some say it was too trivial to control. Others believe the shogunate simply looked the other way. After all, who could monitor every tiny oval coin no bigger than a rice cake? And so koban became the silent script of a repressed world. The elderly used them to quietly pass down wealth. Lovers used them to whisper what hands couldn't touch. Smugglers used them to buy silence. And ordinary dreamers, like you, used them simply as to dream. You leave the tea house. Lanterns sway above you in the night wind. You wonder, if you gave someone a koban today, what would they see in it? An invitation, a story, a piece of golden quiet. The old woman is still there, dozing on her cart. You glance at the koban cat lanterns one last time. Suddenly a breeze lifts one from its string. It falls gently at your feet. You bend down to pick it up. On the back, a single word is etched. Dream. You smile. Whisper to yourself, yeah, that fits. You walk through the morning mist, where the streets are hushed and the old black wooden houses stand silent, as if they're holding their breath. Somewhere far off, you hear the soft clack-clack of wooden clogs on stone. It reminds you of a festival, but you're not sure which one, or if it even exists. Instead, your mind begins to drift to a time when koban, those small oval coins of gold, meant more than money. Not a thing to buy with, but a way to earn trust. You turn down a quiet path and find yourself at the gate of an ancient shrine. A single bell hangs high above, ringing once, its sound stretching out like a sigh from the heavens. In the center of the courtyard, a massive wooden offering box. People once tossed in copper coins and whispered prayers, but today, you see, no copper, only koban.gold. Bright, untouched. No one dares to take them. You look around, and from behind a red pillar a monk steps out, old, calm. His eyes are like dry wells, still deep and far too full of things he no longer needs to say. He sits beside you, gazing at the koban. There was a time, he says, when people believed koban held the energy of the earth and sky, not because it was gold, but because it came from effort, from patience, from prayer. You ask him, why koban? Why not just a regular coin? He smiles, a quiet curve of the lips. Because koban isn't money, he says. It's a commitment. Back in the Edo period, during sacred moments, New Year's, harvest festivals, times when people wished to cleanse misfortune, they would place a koban in the shrine's offering box. They called it Kanyun Osame, not a bribe to the gods, but a vow. I give what I value most, so that something truly good may come. Not everyone could afford such an offering, but those who could sometimes carved their names into the gold, binding their fate to their wish. You glance at an old koban. Its surface is tarnished, scratched by time, but in the center, still legible, are two words: Mother's Smile. Someone once stood here offering a wish for their mother's health, her joy, her long life. Inside the shrine, you notice a wall of tiny cloth pouches, omamori. Each holds a folded piece of paper and something hard inside. You're allowed to open one. Inside, a handwritten prayer and a koban, tiny, barely the size of your thumbnail. There's no doubt now, koban had become a charm. Back then, people believed that carrying even a sliver of koban, sometimes real, sometimes blessed imitation, could protect them from harm, bring fortune, or at least give them the courage to step outside their doors. A little like how we carry our phones. Now, not to use them, but just to hold them when we're nervous. Some omamori were sealed shut. They were called blind koban. You weren't supposed to open them. The blessing only worked if it stayed unread. There's a story of a young warrior who opened his charm the night before a big duel just to see. The next morning he lost his sandals, didn't die, but walked home barefoot. The lesson? Don't mess with what protects you just because you're curious. Historians still argue today, was koban truly sacred? Or did it gain power through shared belief? Either way, you know this. When many people place their hope into a single thing, that thing becomes greater than itself. The monk gestures for you to follow. Behind the shrine, beneath the shade of a centuries-old cypress, you see dozens, no, hundreds, of tiny koban, arranged in shapes, flowers, hearts. The word kokoro, heart. No one takes them, not because they fear being caught, but because that's where hope goes to sleep. You sit beneath the tree, and your fingers brush a koban, with a feather carved into it, cold, but somehow it makes you feel safe. Evening falls slowly. The road back glows with the warm red light of paper lanterns. You leave the shrine, and though you never said a word, it feels like someone heard your wish. The koban in your hand isn't heavy, but it carries the weight of something you didn't know you were hoping for. You step carefully across an old wooden bridge, its planks creaking softly beneath your feet. Below, a slender stream glistens in the crescent moonlight, like silver threads unraveling in silence. The air changes. Gone is the scent of incense, the echo of temple bells. Instead, A different rhythm begins to pulse. The quiet hum of bargaining, the rustle of silk sleeves, and the subtle tension of unseen deals. You've arrived at the region's largest night market. But you're not here for grilled fish or paper fans. This is where merchants, craftsmen, and silver-tongued schemers gather. And here, Koban isn't just a lucky charm or elegant gift. Here, Koban is leverage. It's a weapon. A hand played face up. You drift toward a shabby little stall where a plump man taps impatiently on the wooden counter, as if it owes him money. Laid out before him aren't vegetables or toys, but counterfeit Koban. Some gold-plated, some coated in something shiny you'd rather not ask about. Real or fake, he says, handing you one with a wink. Sometimes it's just a matter of who tells the story first. You flip the coin. On the back, a word is carved. Worry. You raise an eyebrow. Why that word? To remind the customer to pay on time, he says, grinning. Welcome to the world of Koban credit, an ancient game of trust and a surprisingly modern one. Before banks became widespread, people had to invent other ways to make promises stick. So merchants began using Koban as collateral. Instead of handing over actual money, which could be stolen, a buyer would leave a small Koban engraved with their name, a repayment date, and a personal symbol. A golden promise. Break that promise, and you didn't just lose your reputation. Sometimes you lost a family, sometimes an ear. But that's another story. Behind the stall, a red string-tied letter rests on a shelf. The vendor lets you read it, an actual loan agreement from the Edo period, sealed with ink and accompanied by a Koban split clean in two. One half for the lender, one for the borrower. When the day came, the pieces had to fit back together like halves of a heart. If they didn't match, the contract was void. Fraud. As for who first thought of splitting Koban, some say the merchants of Osaka. Others believe it started with traveling kabuki troops trying to protect their wages. You move on, drawn to a quieter stall. A young woman sits cross-legged, painting intricate symbols onto Koban with black ink. She blows gently to dry the designs. Illustrated Koban, she says, for those who need a reason. A reason, you ask? She nods and shows you one, etched with a scene of two cats in straw hats sipping tea. This was his excuse for being late, she giggles. Give one of these to your wife and everything's forgiven. Koban had evolved beyond commerce. They became social tools, tokens of apology, diplomacy, charm. Some shops, when trying to win back a VIP customer, would send a cheerful Koban, engraved with a joke or a personal emblem. You spot one shaped like a fugu fish in a kimono. Below it reads, I'm not sorry, but dinner tonight? Ah, Edo, where even apologies had to be gold-plated and funny. Some Koban were even used between early Yakuza clans, as tokens sealing territories and pacts. This land is mine, that part is yours. No trespassing. If someone broke the deal, their Koban was melted publicly. A silent but fiery declaration of war. You don't know if all of this is true, or half urban legend, but the eyes of the vendors around you, proud and unreadable, make you believe one thing. Whether real or not, Kobans had come to mean more than gold. As you leave the market, a small boy presses something into your palm, a tiny Koban etched with the words, "Until we meet again." You smile and you realize you didn't buy anything tonight, but somehow you've signed a contract with history, a contract written in gold, but one you'll never need to return. You leave the night market behind, stepping into a narrow alley paved with pale white stones. Moonlight drifts lazily across the rooftops, as if it too is in no rush to leave this place. Gone are the laughs, the bargaining, the vibrant rattle of trade. All that remains is the hush of wind brushing past hanging wind chimes, whispers on invisible threads. Here, everything speaks in shadows and silence. And that's when you begin to understand. Koban wasn't just for merchants and common folk. It once moved through the highest corridors of power. You stop in front of a modest wooden house. It looks no different from 1,000 others, except for one curious thing. A birdcage cast in solid brass glows on the front porch. There's no bird inside, just a single koban. The door opens before you can knock. The man inside doesn't. Looks surprised, like he's been expecting you. "Come in," he says. "Want to hear how a koban once saved the life of a samurai?" You nod. He pours tea, calm, unhurried, and begins. There was a warrior, Tadakatsu. He served under Lord Tokugawa. One night he was ambushed while carrying classified orders. The attacker didn't strike at him directly. He went for the satchel. Tadakatsu was wounded, fell into a stream, thought it was the end, but then he pulled out a koban, one engraved with Tokugawa's crest, and threw it on the ground. The attacker stopped. You frown, confused. That koban, the man says, was no ordinary coin. It was a Goyu koban, a seal of imperial business, only issued to those carrying the shogun's most sensitive commands. To strike the bearer of such a token was treason, an offense punishable by death, sometimes by the death of your whole family. You exhale. For the first time you realize koban wasn't just a medium of exchange. It could be a shield of power. Goyu koban were not circulated. They were ornate, often engraved with intricate emblems and official seals, and sometimes only one of each ever existed. They had no market value. Their worth was symbolic. There was once a man, the storyteller says, who tried to forge Sa Goyu koban. Got everything right, except for a slight tilt in the calligraphy of the word loyalty. Executed within 24 hours. Your throat goes dry. These koban weren't just used for royal messages. They were also tokens of promotion. When a samurai rose in rank, he didn't get a scroll or ceremony. He received a koban wrapped in black silk, a silent koban, they called it. No one congratulated him, no fanfare. The message was clear. From now on, more eyes would be watching, and mistakes would cost more than honor. Historians still debate whether these silent koban were widespread or just lore whispered among elite samurai. But one record mentions a man named Ryota, who resigned from his post and buried his koban alongside his sword, as if saying goodbye to his own legacy. No one knows where. Maybe somewhere beneath the pine forest you passed earlier tonight. The man sets a lacquer box in front of you. Inside rests a koban, small, plain, no markings except for a hairline crack, like a lightning strike frozen in gold. "I found this outside Osaka," he says, "next to the body of a former spy." You ask, "How do you know he was a spy?" He shrugs. "There was a note in his coat. If captured, break the koban in two. Guess he didn't make it in time." You swallow. In an era where status, survival, and secrecy hinged on the smallest of signs, koban wasn't just currency. It was code, a cipher, a key, a mute witness to conspiracies never written down. When you rise to leave, the man walks you to the door. He presses something into your hand, a koban no bigger than your pinky nail. One word is carved into it. Proof. "Keep it," he murmurs, "in case you ever need to prove you once understood history." You're not sure you truly do understand, but the koban, not shining, not perfect, is warm in your hand, as if it carries something greater than the tale itself. You walk away. The wind lifts your hair, and you realize some vows don't need to be spoken. All it takes is a single koban, and someone still quiet enough to listen. You walk on, leaving behind the strange little house where koban were spoken of like coded emblems of honor. This time the path curves through a grove of bamboo, The wind whispers through the leaves in a hush so soft it feels like ancient secrets brushing against your ears. Each step you take is like wading deeper into a stream of time, but this current flows differently. It's not as solemn as the samurai, nor as cunning as the merchants. No, this time it belongs to the artists. You emerge from the grove and find yourself standing in front of a small kabuki theater. The facade is weathered, the lanterns dim, the indigo curtains faded with time. You slip inside and an actor in resplendent costume, cheeks painted with vivid blush, eyes sharp as a paper-thin blade, turns toward you, then nods. "Sit," he says. "Tonight's performance is told through koban." You frown. "A play told with money." "Not money," the actor corrects, drawing from his sleeve a long, unusually shaped koban engraved with the mask of a theatrical spirit. "An artist's koban." You take it. On the back is a single word, roll. Tiny serrated edges run along its rim, as if this coin was once part of something mechanical. You tilt your head, puzzled. The actor laughs. "It was a prop," he explains. "Before we had projectors, we used koban to reflect light, and during dramatic scenes we'd spin it under a lantern. That shimmer, that was the twist." "Yes, that's right." In the world of kabuki, where expressions had to be bold enough for even the back row to feel, koban were once used as crude but ingenious light effects, a technique known as hikari koban, the koban of light. You're skeptical? Understandable. Historians still debate whether hikari koban was truly widespread or just a myth whispered between performers. But there is an old letter that survives. It reads, "As that rainy night when the koban's light passed across her face, the entire theater held its breath, as if the moon had risen mid-storm." You imagine it, and suddenly the koban in your hand is no longer a coin. It's a spotlight. A spell, but there's more. In the Edo entertainment world, where the line between performance and politics was thinner than silk, koban were also used as backstage passes. Specially marked koban granted access behind the curtains. Want to meet the lead actor after the show? Present a koban stamped by the troupe. No koban, no entry. Some wealthy patrons even gifted custom koban to their favorite performers, tokens of admiration or subtle invitations. These koban were often intricately designed, a crane in flight, a moon sinking into waves, or simply an open fan. Inside a glass case in the corner of the theater, you spot a collection of koban once given to a performer named Ayame, the one they called the Heart of Spring's Light for over 30 years. One koban stands out. It bears the image of a shamisen and an inscription. "Don't turn back when dawn arrives." You glance at the actor beside you. His gaze drifts far away. "Ayame once left the stage," he says quietly. "Left the city behind." They say he carried only one koban with him, not for money, but because it was the final role he never got to play. You smile faintly. There's something beautifully sad in the way this artist cradles a koban, not as currency, but as a memory, a character, a note in a song left unfinished. As you prepare to leave the theater, someone hands you a small koban. Its face is worn, scratched. On the back, a single word. Pause. "For the moment," the actor says, "when you need a story no one else has told." You step back out into the wind. It carries with it the faint scent of sweat and stage makeup, a shimmer of fading light and something unshakable. Koban didn't just buy survival, sometimes they preserved the light. You find yourself back on the main road, the night already deep. Oil lamps flicker quietly in the wind, their flames trembling like they're about to fade after a long day of shining. But you're not tired yet. The story goes on. And koban you're beginning to see, still holds many layers yet to be peeled back. You duck into a small tea house by the riverbank, where the water glimmers like it's been dusted with gold. The owner, a tiny old woman with quick, wiry hands, hands you a steaming cup of tea and asks quietly, "Have you ever heard of fake Koban?" You almost choke. Fake? Gold with fakes? She laughs, the wrinkles around her eyes crinkling into sparkling slits. Not just fakes, ones that shook all of Edo to its core. You blink, intrigued, and she begins to tell her tale. Late 18th century, a time when the treasury was stretched thin, a group of craftsmen was tasked with recycling old koban called kanhei koban, melting them down and recasting into new coins. Problem was gold was scarce, so they cut the gold content but kept the coins looking exactly the same. That's when the Genroku fake koban was born. On the surface, indistinguishable. But hold one long enough, and you'd feel it warm slower in your hand. Because the metal inside was different. The cunning merchants caught on first. They started refusing koban handed over by strangers unless the coin was bitten. Yes, bitten. Not to eat, but to test softness. You smile. It sounds almost like something out of an old pirate movie. Historians still argue if the biting koban habit ever really spread, or if it's just Edo period folklore, but a tax report from 1790 recorded nearly 40 koban returned on suspicion of impurity, all bore teeth marks. You wonder if dentists back then ever complained about mass dental chipping. Then everything blew wide open when Shimada Hachimon, a treasury inspector, was caught smuggling fake koban out, trading them for Western luxuries. He swapped a chest, curved counterfeit coins for a Spanish wooden clock, 3 rolls of fine Italian red cloth and a set of purple glassware. You frown. Why would anyone trust fake koban? The old woman taps the table with a knowing smile. Because he never spent them. Then she pulls out a small wooden box. Inside lies a koban, dull, not quite gleaming, carved with exquisite detail. A dragon clutching a pearl. He gave those as gifts, tokens of friendship. No one checks gifts. A chill runs down your spine. And so fake koban were no longer just money. They became instruments of deceit. Shimada's scandal wasn't uncovered because of the fake koban themselves, but because he made a mistake. He gifted one to a geisha and then abandoned her. The geisha sold the coin to flee, and the buyer, a seasoned merchant, noticed something was off. Love, money, and betrayal, a classic trio that never grows old. The shock from this scandal forced the shogunate to decree every newly minted koban must bear a unique central workshop stamp and asymmetrical embossing to thwart copying. They even appointed koban watchers, specialists whose job was to authenticate coins in circulation. A heavy responsibility, for a mistake meant no teeth left to bite. Since then, fake koban became a silent fear. No one spoke openly, but everyone was wary. You ask the old woman, "Do you think fake koban still circulate today?" She shrugs. If they do, they're probably tucked away in old gift boxes, or sunk at the bottom of a river, thrown away with a curse. Don't come back. You clutch your teacup tighter. It's cold now. But your heart isn't, just a little heavier, because koban, once a symbol of fortune, was also a sign of deception. And like all symbols, its true value lies not in its shape or material, but in whose hands it rests and for what purpose. You step out into the night air. A thin mist wraps around your collar like a delicate shawl. On the river's surface, the moon shines quietly. No need to blaze bright, just right. Just like koban. You keep walking, your steps softening as your heart begins to soften too. The secrets of koban, from samurai codes to theatrical artists, from symbols of light to cunning counterfeits, unravel like layers of an ancient painting. Just when you think you've grasped their story, you come upon a small stone bridge. There, resting solemnly in the center, is a wooden box. A man stands beside it, dressed simply in a clean kimono, bowing his head in greeting. Did you know koban were once used for marriage proposals? You pause. Marriage proposals. Yes. He opens the box to reveal a special koban, its surface unadorned except for a small dent in the shape of a heart. No shine, no engraving, no honor medal, just a subtle indentation. He says love in Edo was never spoken plainly. People sent signs, and koban was one of them. Curious, you step closer. He continues, koban are symbols of luck, endurance, and completeness. A serious man, intent on commitment, would give a koban with smoothed edges, meaning I have polished my life, now I wait for you to complete it. You chuckle softly. I bet some just sent the rough koban as is, huh? Oh, absolutely, those confident or lazy. He shrugs. You imagine a man, instead of slipping on a ring, quietly handing over a koban to his beloved, then stepping back, waiting for her reaction. And if the recipient kept the koban without a word, you ask, it means yes. He nods. If returned, it's a no. If handed back wrapped in silk, they're still thinking. You joke, I guess there were plenty of ghosters back then too who never returned their koban. Exactly, he says, which is why there was another custom. A tiny mark was carved on the rim, known only to the two involved. If that koban ever fell into the wrong hands, the feelings it represented were null and void. Historians still debate how common this love koban really were. Official records are scarce. But in a diary from 1813, a young woman wrote, "Today he slipped a koban under my sleeve as he bowed. I knew because it bore a teardrop mark only I had ever seen. I couldn't sleep all night because its light whispered, 'Please don't refuse.'" You picture it. A bow, a cold koban, carefully hidden. A heart fluttering in silence, unnamed, unspoken. You look at the man by the bridge, and he adds, "But koban don't always mean union. In some countryside places, a rejected koban would be hung outside the house as a message. This heart has chosen no one. Take your luck elsewhere." There's something both romantic and a little cruel about putting love on a coin. But you understand, in a world where gestures are coded, where blunt words are rude, koban was a language. No words needed, just understanding. You leave the bridge with no koban in your hands. Still, you feel as if you carry a secret, a forgotten cipher from the past that only those in love could ever decode. And as you walk away, the man's soft voice follows you. If you ever see a koban with two folding fans crossed, keep it close. It means, though we may face the wind from different directions, we will always remember each other like the fan's shadow on paper. You say nothing, but you know, maybe tonight you'll dream of a koban resting in someone's eye, hand cold as metal but warm as a remember. You leave the bridge, your heart still hovering, as if you just heard a poem written in golden silence. Each step feels a little heavier, not from fatigue, but because the things you've learned cling to you like a faint, lingering incense smoke. Yet the night is far from over, and koban still have stories left to tell. You turn into a narrow alley where old shops line the walls, their faded signs and creaking wooden doors, whispering secrets as the wind slips through. A man is arranging small boxes on a woven mat. When you lean in, you see koban sliced clean in half, not broken, cut with care as if on purpose. "You're looking at the proof of an economic nightmare," he says without looking up. When the country fell into chaos, koban weren't just gold, they were lifelines. You sit down quietly. He tells you that in the early 19th century, Japan faced a string of disasters, floods, droughts, famine. Rice became scarce, salt. Prices doubled, and those holding koban couldn't spend them easily. "No one sells half a bowl of rice for a whole koban," he explains. So they cut them in half. You picture the scene in your mind. A trembling father holding a koban over a cutting board, a blade pressed gently down. The sharp click of metal splitting, and suddenly a coin, and with it, hope, is divided in two. These cut coins were called han koban, half koban. Soon some were quartered, shihan koban, a desperate way to stretch value, but also a crack in faith for the entire currency system. Did the government actually approve of people slicing koban? No clear decree ever said so. But in practice, cut koban circulated. Some temples even accepted them as offerings with the note, "Sincere hearts, though divided, remain whole." You ask, if a koban isn't whole, is it still a koban? He nods slowly. Like a person with a broken heart, the crack remains, but they are still themselves, maybe even more precious. You pick up a half koban. It's sharp at the edges, cold but not frightening, like remembering someone from your past. Incomplete but undeniably real. As war loomed, he goes on, some started burying cut koban beneath their floors, believing that splitting the coins hid them from the eyes of commanders. They thought cut koban weren't riches, but talismans. You smile softly. Talismans of fear, he shrugs, and talismans of hope, that someday all the pieces would be gathered, made whole again. You find no words, but deep inside, your heart feels like it's slowly gathering scattered shards of memory, about koban, about the hands that once held them, and about those old souls forced to be brave even as they divided their most precious things. You stand and hand the half koban back to the old man. He doesn't look up, just says, "Take it with you. It's part of the story you need to keep." You don't argue. You slip the half koban into your coat pocket where it fits snugly, like it's been waiting there for hundreds of years. The night is still young, and you're far from done. You slip quietly away from the alley, your steps softer now, as if that half koban tucked in your pocket is pulling you toward another world, one where everything whispers in voices long forgotten. Up ahead, a temple roof emerges from the mist, its curved tiles like gentle waves. At the entrance stand two stone lanterns, one worn, its top chipped away. Inside the temple, a woman sweeps fallen leaves, small and deliberate in her movements. When you step inside, she looks up and smiles warmly. You've come at just the right time. We just finished a ritual with koban, one for good fortune. You blink, surprised. A temple? Doing rituals with money? She sets down her broom, gently. Not money, symbols. Koban were used as charms, not for spending, but for protection. You settle on a stone step, the temple's soft glow spilling out like a dream. She tells you that since Edo times, many believed koban were more than currency. They carried the spirit of precious metal, able to turn misfortune into blessing. People wrapped koban in red silk and placed them on ancestral altars at New Year. Some even sprinkled salt on the coins and slipped them under pillows to chase away nightmares. You raise an eyebrow. Sleeping with money under your head? Aren't you worried about dreaming of taxes? She laughs, a clear, ringing sound. Better nightmares than empty pockets. Then she shares a strange story. In Tenchian, a small riverside village, a blacksmith crafted a special koban, not for trade but as a talisman. He engraved 49 tiny characters on its surface, each a wish from someone in the village. He sealed it in a sacred wooden box and buried it beneath the shrine. After that, the village hadn't seen a single flood for 30 years. Whether it was fate or coincidence, the villagers believed one thing for sure. That koban protected us. You ask, is it still there? She leads you to a small statue, inside the temple. At its base, a weathered wooden plaque reads faintly, "Wish koban, do not use, do not open, just keep." You stand silent, amazed. In a world where everything seems made to be spent, it's a wonder to find something kept. Simply for faith, she continues. Some Ida women never spent the very first koban they earned. They wrapped it carefully, put it away, calling it their starting koban, believing if they used it, bad luck would follow forever. You exhale softly, a breath like a quiet prayer of thanks for the little things still cherished. Then, she bends down and picks up a small envelope from the altar's corner, offering it to you. Inside is a replica koban, just bronze but carved just like those old offerings. Take it with you if you believe in luck. You hesitate, then accept. It's light, barely warm, nowhere near the weight of the half koban in your pocket, but the feeling it gives you is something else, like it knows you won't spend it. You'll keep it, a folded story resting quietly in your palm. As you leave, she calls softly after you. Don't see koban as just coins. See them as reminders. Not everything has to be exchanged. You nod, and beneath the still night sky, you feel as if someone has just taught you how to hold on to what truly matters. Not to flaunt, not to spend, but to remember. You stepped out of the temple, the sky above turning a warm gray like water cloaked in mist. In your pocket were two koban, one half real, one a replica, and both felt heavier than any object you'd ever carried. Not because of the gold itself, but because of the stories bound to them, layered like a shell of time that could never be peeled away. You kept walking until you stopped before an old wooden house. A faded silver plaque hung on the door, inscribed with the word Shokenya, the appraisal house. Silence came from within, but you knocked anyway. After a moment, the sliding door creaked open, revealing an old man with thick spectacles. Here to have your koban examined? You nodded quietly. He motioned you inside, and you sat across from him at a heavy wooden table scented with camphor. He placed on the table a large magnifying glass nearly the size of his palm, a small scale, and a notebook densely packed with handwriting. Back in the Edo period, he said, kobans were forged so often the government had to hire shokunin, appraisers, to separate the genuine from the counterfeit. You blinked, surprised. They faked gold coins. He chuckled softly. Not just gold, faith too. He pulled out a sample koban, shining brightly, its engravings sharp like a blade. Then he compared it with another koban, nearly identical, but when tapped lightly, the sound was different. This is a Nisei koban, he explained, made of copper, thinly gilded. Skilled hands could fool the eyes, but not the ears. You tapped the koban in your pocket. The sound was dull. So this one, he tilted his head thoughtfully. Real metal, not an Edo koban, but carved correctly. A sincere reproduction. Not fake, just born later. You breathed a quiet sigh of relief. He went on to tell you that there was a time, especially in the early 1700s, when counterfeit koban makers were so numerous that the government issued new koban every few years, tweaking details to mark each coin's generation. Coins have lifetimes just like people, he said softly. Each era has its own engraving style, thickness and sound. Some generations are so rare now they've become legends. Collectors call them the missing koban. You smiled. Like the coins that disappear in washing machines these days. He laughed with you. Only difference is missing koban might be worth a small fortune. Some counterfeit koban were even more beautiful than the real ones. The ultimate irony. It was said that when freed from official restrictions, craftsmen created designs far more exquisite than imperial standards. Historians still debate whether some too perfect koban were actually counterfeit coins secretly commissioned by the government, a quiet policy to stabilize the market in chaotic times, a secret no one admits. You thought about it. So maybe real koban sometimes lost to the fakes, at least artistically. Much like people, sometimes copies are polished more carefully than originals because they constantly have to prove their worth. The old man poured you a cup of hot tea. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were sharp and clear. You know, There was a time people even carried fake koban as lucky charms, believing if they survived with a counterfeit on them, then luck was truly theirs. You chuckled. So every time I use fake stuff, I should say a prayer. Not exactly. He replied, but remember, koban, real or fake, is still a story. The question is, which story do you want to tell? You left the wooden house as night deepened, but inside you everything began to glow brighter. Every worn engraving, every faint sound, every koban life that had passed. You began to realize that what's called fake isn't always lesser. Sometimes it's a copy of hope, and in your pocket the replica koban lay quietly, not to be spent, but to remind you. Some things, when kept. You stepped quietly away from the old appraiser's house. The wind had turned, cool and deliberate, brushing the back of your neck like a whispered reminder that time was still moving. Even if you were caught inside an old, unfinished story, you wandered into another part of the town, where the laughter of diners echoed softly from lantern-lit food stalls. Along a narrow cobblestone street stood a tiny wooden shop. No signboard, just a low glass window displaying a handful of faded items, a porcelain doll, a paper fan, and, right in the center, a string of koban tied with red thread. Inside, a middle-aged woman was threading beads onto a necklace. As you entered, she looked up, eyes gentle and sharp all at once, like someone who had lived long enough to understand without asking. "You're here for the koban, aren't you?" she said, skipping past pleasantries. You nodded, and she set the string of koban from the window onto the counter. "These are omamori koban," she said. "People wear them for fortune, but not the kind where money falls from the sky. The kind where you're still alive, still have enough to eat, and still have your dignity." You gave a small laugh. "Sounds like the real-life version of 'enough is a feast,'" she nodded. "And that's why koban became gifts once." You blinked. She began telling you about an old, nearly forgotten custom from the Edo period, kobanmaki, small envelopes containing koban given during weddings or the opening of new shops. But not just any koban was given. Only the ones that had passed through good hands. Those were called lucky koban, she said, her voice softening, like receiving something that helped someone else live well, and believing it might help you do the same. Some koban, she explained, were even purified, passed through incense smoke or rinsed in the first rain of the new year before being offered, as if cleaning not the coin but its spirit. "Not everyone gives koban," she added, "only those who believe that wealth isn't in what you keep, but in knowing when to give it away." You reached out and touched the string of koban. It felt strangely familiar, not because you'd seen it before, but because part of you had always wished someone would give you something simple and quiet, like a blessing without words. No one knows for sure whether gift koban were specially minted. Some had different weight, more delicate details, and never appeared in circulation. Perhaps they were crafted by artisans for family rituals. Perhaps they were molded from someone's own gold, meant not to be spent, but to be remembered. "You whispered, casting a wish into metal." The woman smiled. "Exactly, forged by hand, by time, and by trust. You thought of the gifts you'd received in life, some expensive, some barely worth a coin, and how only a few carried the feeling of this koban, something made not to be yours, but to let you carry someone else's hope." She handed you a smaller string of koban, not real, just a replica, yet each tiny coin was etched with a single word: heart, peace, patience, blessing. You didn't ask for the price. You simply reached out and took it quietly. And when you stepped back out into the night, the wind chime above the door let out a soft ring, like a thank you whispered from the past. The night moved on, but something within you stayed still. Not time, but a thought, that a koban isn't just money, it's a wish cast in metal, passed hand to hand by those who live, and held onto by those who believe. You left the neighborhood just as the streets began to quiet. Your footsteps echoed against the cold stone path, mingling with the faint, trembling chirps of crickets along the wall. With every step, it felt like you were walking through layers of time, like brushing past the dust of forgotten centuries. And in your pocket, the Koban replica tapped lightly against your side, nodding along, as if it too remembered. Up ahead stood a large wooden building. Its architecture clung to the past, though a faint fluorescent glow pulsed from within. Over the gate, a sign read, "Edo Coin Museum, open only at night. A museum about currency, open only after dark." Strange, but somehow fitting, like finding a night owl reading about compound interest in the back of a smoky bar. You stepped inside, and a chill swept over you. The silence was nearly total. Row after row of glass cases stretched into the dim light, each one holding a different Koban coin, carefully arranged by era. Some shone with a burnished gold glow. Others were dulled, almost bronze. Some were warped, bent from years of use, even strung as talismans across the backs of war horses. Each case bore odd poetic names: Keicho Koban, Genroku Koban, Bunka Koban. You stopped in front of one coin in particular, deformed on one side with a carving mistake where Fuku, fortune, was misspelled as Fu. The plaque read, "Misprint Koban, only 30 ever made, almost all recalled." You smirked. Probably. Worth 10 times more than the perfect ones now. A voice behind you replied, "Exactly, because mistakes gain value, especially when time makes them rare." You turned. A man in a rumpled coat emerged from the shadows. "I'm the knight. Watch here," he said. "No one usually comes, but you're different. You're searching for something." You nodded quietly. He began guiding you down the rows of displays, weaving stories you'd never heard before. "There was a time," he said, "when Koban were banned in some provinces because they were too beautiful. People refused to spend them." Another time, Koban were melted down, softened like butter and reshaped into jewelry. Illegals, but undeniably art. And at the end of the Edo period, when the shogunate was crumbling, some lords buried Koban deep in the forest, believing they'd return one day and use the gold to restore the nation. You asked, "Has anyone ever found one of those treasures?" He smiled. "No treasure left whole, only fragments of stories. Sometimes half a coin, sometimes a shallow imprint in the earth, sometimes just a tale an old man tells in a tavern. No one knows if the buried Koban legends are real or myths, spread to keep spirits alive during turbulent times. But the night watchman believed this. Truth may fade, but belief leaves a mark. He led you to the final display. Inside was a Koban made not of gold, but of clay. Cracked, faded, worthless in any market sense. "This," he said, "is a training Koban for children. They were given these to play with before they were allowed to even touch a real one." You were silent. It wasn't made to be spent, not even to be kept, only to be understood. "To learn value," he said, "not ownership." You left the museum just before dawn. In your hand was a small admission ticket printed with the image of the clay Koban. You knew it held no monetary value, and for that very reason you would never throw it away. Maybe that was the greatest thing Koban ever taught, that not everything must serve its original purpose, that some objects and some people. You found your way back to the familiar street. The sky has turned a soft, faded ash blue. Red lanterns no longer glow, just sway gently, like they're yawning after a sleepless night. Everything feels quieter now, dimmer, as if the world itself is changing shifts, making room for a long dream. You step into a small roadside tea house. The young woman behind the counter, hair tied in a high bun, doesn't ask what you'd like. She simply nods, and soon a warm cup of tea is set. Before you, steam rises in a delicate ribbon, brushing your face like a mother's hand when you were a child. You place the string of replica Koban coins on the table. She glances at them, then smiles. "Oh," she says, "this kind is usually used during the doll festival." You raise an eyebrow. "Back in the day," she continues, "families would set up dolls representing the imperial court. But if they couldn't afford the full display, just a few symbolic items would do. One of them was a string of Koban, placed next to the princess doll, meant as a wish that the little girl would grow up in abundance. Not luxury, necessarily, just a life without lack, of love, of trust." You shake your head and chuckle. "Why does everything lead back to Koban?" She winks. "Because the Japanese have a quiet belief that money isn't just for spending. It holds memory, intention, even things we can't quite put into words." Outside the window, morning sunlight begins to slip across the tiled rooftops, scattering like gold dust. Everything moves slower now, softer. You think back on the Koban you encountered through the night, coins that carried blessings, gifts meant to remind someone how to live, mistakes turned into treasure. Even a clay Koban, worthless in form but priceless in what it taught. And then it hits you, for centuries Koban haven't just existed as metal. They've been amulets, wedding tokens, teaching tools, fireside stories, silent proof of belief, and perhaps most beautifully, they've been whispers from the past, saying gently, "Don't worry, you'll be all right." Historians still debate whether people in old Japan truly believed Koban was sacred, or whether that was just myth layered over time. But you understand, now sometimes just the act of believing is what gives something power. A group of schoolchildren passes by outside, chattering brightly. One of them picks up a coin from the sidewalk and holds it high, beaming like she's found buried treasure. You remember, in Japanese, the pronunciation of certain coins sounds like good fortune or destiny. Like Koban, it's an unspoken wish, visible only to those who know how to see. You pay for your tea, thank the woman, and step back onto the path. But nothing feels old anymore. Every stone you tread now holds a story. A quiet one, yes, but somehow you know. They're smiling. You feel your breath slow, like a paper fan winding down. Even your heartbeat seems gentler now. Every detail around you softens like silk in sunlight, like the distant beat of a ceremonial drum, slow, warm, alive. The memories of the night begin to blur, like morning light filtered through mist to your eye. Hear leaves rustling. Or was that your blanket shifting as you turned over? You're not sure anymore. Your eyes begin to close, and the world fades into a pale golden haze, like the surface of a well-worn Koban. No more questions. No more need to know what's fact and what's just legend. There's only you, and the soft whisper of history was lulling you to sleep.